Good morning, this is Deepak. How are you? So I just arrived yesterday in Seattle from Houston, Texas, long flight and change in time zones. And I skipped my daily podcast yesterday, but I'm here now, and it's about 4:36 in the morning. It's early morning. Seattle is quite cold actually after Texas. This is a sudden change in weather. So we are continuing our discussions on fundamental reality here, and these discussions are on our website, discoveringyourcosmicself.com. You're invited to join here for these discussions, ask questions, answer questions, and we have been asking many questions of readers as well. But today I wanted to focus on some issues that came up from questions on our discussion board, including does thought create reality, and also following up on a very peculiar and interesting and curious interview that I had with IFL Science. For those of you who don't know IFL Science, it is a British publication. It really means I effing love science. It has a lot of good information. The attitude is a little snarky and condescending and British. And my interview started with a chap called Robin Andrews, and he was combative right from the start. So I knew it wasn't going to be a favorable interview. By the way, You Are the Universe is now in its second week on the New York Times bestseller list in the non-fiction category. So I'm very happy about that. And most of the reviews actually have been very good. There's a review this week in the New York Book of Reviews, New York Review of Books or something like that, which is very good. And there have been a couple of good reviews elsewhere as well. A kind of skeptical review on Skeptic magazine by my co-author Leonard Malodino and Michael Shermer, but not egregious, not nasty, very reasonable in its analysis of the book. Does not agree with the worldview of the book, but it does like some of the science presented in it and the worldview that we present, Menas and I, respectfully. Okay, so coming back to the questions that have been posed by many people, and the questions that came up also in this interview on IFL Science. Let's start with certain principles. So I'm going to start with certain principles to see why when I say you are the universe, I mean that literally. And Menas Kafatos, my co-author, means that literally as well. 2 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. Happy about that, and happy for your support. Okay, so I'm going to start with certain principles. Okay, let's start, and I made some notes for today's conversation. Concept number one. All concepts such as birth, death, growth, decay, time, youth, old age, childhood, apply to the experience of objects. And our body itself is an object of experience. I think everybody would agree on that the physical world, the physical universe, or that which we call the physical world is in fact experience, right? You cannot describe an object if you haven't experienced it, okay? So that includes your physical body. Now, no object, including our physical body, can be independent from the experience of it. You would not know how to describe it if it was independent of experience. No object, including our physical body, can be independent from the experience of it, because you would not be able to describe it. Principle number 3, when we break down experience into raw elements, what we discover is that those raw elements are sound, sensations such as color, shape, forms, tastes, smells, textures, hardness, smoothness, roughness, solidity, wetness, vaporousness, airiness, fragrance, odor, etc. That's fundamental experience. Now, if I asked you what is this, you might say that's a book. But that's a human construct based on the visual experience of color and shape, and this sound based on this texture, hardness. Okay? That's simple, right? So this book is a human construct based on raw experience of sensations. Okay? So when we have broken down experience, then what we do is we give names to these modes of knowing and experience, and we call them objects. So we call this a book, we call this a piece of paper, we call this a coffee cup, and we call this a human body. Agreed? I hope you agree. Okay, let me go on with my train of thinking. Anything that we can give a name to or describe with words is a mode of knowing and experience. Anything that we can give a name to or describe is a mode of human experience and a mode of knowing in human experience. Therefore, the human universe, based on modes of knowing and experience, is in human consciousness. The modes of knowing and feeling that construct the human universe are mental activity that we call thought. But what is thought? Thought is a modified form of consciousness. If you ask somebody, what is thought? I think the best answer would be, it's a modified form of consciousness. It arises in consciousness, it subsides in consciousness. I think you would have to agree. The universe, along with that which we call our own mind and our own body, are modifications of awareness. Our mind, our body, are modifications of awareness. How do we experience our mind and body? As intermittent sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. There's no experience that is not a combination of intermittent sensations, images, feelings, or thoughts. By sensations, I mean all the sensations that are modifications of consciousness that we refer to as sense perceptions. So, when we ask these questions, then of course people ask also, then is reality subject to revision? If reality is conceived, constructed, governed, and comes into existence in our own awareness or consciousness, is it subject to revision? And I would say the answer to that is there are certain modes of experience, that are regularities of experience, that we call natural laws that cannot be changed, and therefore the reality that we experience as the human universe is not subject to revision. But there are many other modes of reality that are subject to revision, such as our personal relationships, such as our social interactions, such as our relationship to that which we call the universe, and that which we call our own body. All these are subject to revision. So the answer to is reality subject to revision? We'd say yes and no. The regularities of experience that we call natural laws are not subject to revision. But there are other qualities of awareness that science cannot study, such as meaning and purpose, love, joy, the meaning of suffering, the meaning of relationship, the search for truth, beauty, harmony, the understanding of what evolution really means. These are all, of course, subject to revision. So, of course, I've been using the word I and we all this time. So what do we mean by the word I or we? By the word I or we, I'm referring to awareness itself. So we is not a person, but the awareness in which the person and the body, mind, and universe is a process. Okay, so this body, mind, and the universe are a unified process in awareness. And awareness is not personal. Okay, awareness is not personal. Perceptions can be personal. Interpretations of perceptions can be personal. There are, of course, common perceptions that we have, such as we all experience the sun rising in the morning, the earth spinning on its own axis causes that, and as the same as the experience of the perception that the sun is setting at night, these are all based on a deeper knowing of the understanding of regularities of experience. So perceptions are, of course, species specific. We don't have the same perceptions of a bat or a bird or a dolphin or a crocodile or an insect with a different kind of eyes and different responses in intensity to the frequencies of light. So there are certain perceptions that are uniquely human, and therefore we call that the world, but it's actually a mode of knowing and experience in human consciousness with an instrument called a human brain. Okay, so does everything I said discredit the scientific method? That was a question that this snarky fellow, Robin Andrews, whatever his name was, he asked me, do you discredit science? And of course, it was only an interview and you can't have a long answer, but the scientific method, it cannot be discredited. Science is a system of thought based on observation, experiment, and theory. But do remember that all observation is made in consciousness, all interpretation is made in consciousness, all theories are conceived in consciousness, and all observations are made in consciousness. So science is an activity in consciousness. You can't get behind consciousness, as Max Planck said. Okay, so the scientific method does look at the regularities of experience, labels them as natural laws, and that creates various technologies, including the technology that I'm using right now to speak to all of you, including the technology that allows us to get on the internet and send each other text messages and songs and videos, including the technology that helped create a solution to many diseases and conquered diseases, extended our lifespan, etc., etc. So all these technologies have benefited mankind and given us a deeper understanding of the regularities of experience that we call natural laws. But science is definitely in consciousness. It's an activity in consciousness. I was asked by Robin Andrews, is science the best way to solve the problems of the world? And I said yes, tinged with a bit of understanding of the philosophy of science. And what I meant by that was that science is based on subject-object split, which is artificial. There's me, and there is the universe. And that is an artificial split. The scientist measures modes of knowing and experience. He calls that objective reality. But you cannot separate what we call objective reality from modes of knowing and experience in our own awareness. Okay, objective facts are modes of knowledge, modes of knowing. And knowing cannot be separated from the awareness in which knowing occurs. Now, because science is based on subject-object split, we are now trying to use the scientific method to cure or solve the problems created by the scientific method, such as climate change, global warming, the melting of glaciers, the rising of tides, the extinction of species, the problems created with mechanized death and nuclear weapons in the hands of irresponsible leaders. So everything that we see as wrong with the world, an unsustainable planet, extinction of species, poison in our food chain with petroleum products, risking our own extinction, is a product of the scientific method based on subject-object split. So a more compassionate science, a science that looks at itself as a system of thought within consciousness, a science that is based on meaning, purpose, love, compassion, joy, equanimity, can indeed solve the problems that were created by a science based on an artificial subject-object split. Okay, so that's the only way for us to move forward with science. Finally, I want to address this headline, this sensational headline that appeared in the I effing love science interview. All of science is a metaphor. Deepak Chopra's curious interview with I effing love science. So why did I say all of science is a metaphor? Because science is a system of thought, right? Systems of thought give us certain modes of knowing based on experience. Science is a particular system of thought based on modes of knowing that come from observation, experiment, and theory in consciousness. So the scientific method is in fact to ask questions. And I think it was one of the pioneers of quantum physics who said, nature does not reveal itself to us as she is, but nature reveals itself to us based on the questions we ask. Is it a wave? Is it a particle? Depends on the question. If you ask a wave-like question and set up the experiment in that way, you'll get a wave-like answer. If you ask a particle-like question and set up the experiment in that way, then you'll get a particle-like answer. Is it a wave or a particle? Depends on the question and the methodology that you use. And all these are actually construed and constructed in consciousness. As the author of the article, I keep forgetting his name, Robin Andrews, says the etymology of the word science is to know. Okay, that's right, to know, and a mode of knowing in awareness, a mode of knowing in awareness. So the description that science gives us of the world is a metaphorical description of the world, metaphorical description of reality. There are other systems of thought, theology, philosophy, religion. These are also systems of thought that they create their own metaphors of reality. So yes, everyday reality is a metaphor. Everyday reality is a human construct. It's a human construct. And that is what is meant by this book. The book that I'm holding in my hand. The book itself is a human construct, and the universe is a human construct. And the construct is created in a more fundamental reality that is called awareness. Awareness is the only reality. Everything else is constructs in awareness. Now, of course, we have access to human awareness with human experiences, human observations, human experiments, human interpretations, human observations, human theories. So when I say you are the universe, I mean it literally. Literally. That is the only thing I mean literally. And that is, you are the conceiver, and you construct and govern and become the experience of the universe. But you is not a person. You is the awareness in which even the person with their body-mind is a process. Now, I don't expect people who are trained in only the scientific method to totally understand this, because they are bamboozled by the methodology of their own understanding. Bamboozled actually by the superstition of matter. At the most fundamental level, matter is immaterial. Matter is an activity in nothingness. Go beyond the appearance of physical reality, because physical reality is just sensations that are an activity in consciousness, sensations, images, feelings, thoughts that arise in consciousness, are occurring in consciousness, are known in consciousness, and then subside in consciousness. All these activities are in time, but the awareness, the consciousness in which those activities are occurring is not in time, and that is you. You are that, I am that. All this is that, that alone is. Tattvamasi, aham brahmasmi. So, is science a metaphor? Yes, science is a metaphor for reality. So is theology, so is religion, so is philosophy. The only thing that is not a metaphor is you, the awareness in which all this is happening. Okay? What is science? Science is a particular methodology for looking at what we call the objective world. But the objective world is a mode of knowing and experience in consciousness. If only we could get that, then we would see that science and spirituality cannot be antagonistic or different. Science says, what's there? And spirituality asks, who's asking? Who wants to know? And why? I hope that helps. So we'll continue these discussions. Once again, thank you for helping make You Are the Universe appear on the New York Times non-fiction bestseller list 2 weeks in a row, the first 2 weeks of its publication. Also on the Wall Street Journal, also in the Washington Post, and in every city, at least in the USA. So I'm continuing my tour in Seattle, and then San Francisco, and then Los Angeles. And by the way, the book is going to be discussed on public television, a 1-hour program on public television nationwide. And I would like you to help public television, which is struggling a little bit under the new policies that may come about with the new administration. So your help and support of public television is deeply appreciated. In the meanwhile, we'll continue our discussions on discoveringyourcosmicself.com. All the best. I'll see you tomorrow.